Welcome to the E-Show with Neil Ravin. Founded in 2013, the EHL has become the college placement leader on the East Coast. Sit back and learn more about the next step in your junior hockey career.
Welcome to the E-Show, presented by the Penalty Box Foundation. The Foundation's mission centers around their daily motto, we take care of our own, as they help out all of those within the hockey community who've experienced a catastrophic event. Learn more at penaltyboxfoundation.org. What's up? My name is Neil Ravin, and this is episode number 100 of the E-Show. On this week's episode, we celebrate hitting the century mark with a pair of very special guests. First up, we welcome Mick Deaver to the podcast. Deaver spent 2 seasons playing for the Boston Bandits in the EHLP. Tragically, his hockey career ended on a very fluke play, but since then he's learned to walk again after spending months in rehab, and he's become a true inspiration. Following up Deaver is Mark Kumpel, the first commissioner of the EHL. Mark and I look back on the years that we spent together, highlighting stories from all-star events and past editions of the Frozen Finals. Wrapping things up at the very end, we provide a brief update on the E-Crew Fantasy Challenge. I'm honored to be joined now by Mick Deaver. How's it going, Mick?
Good. Yourself?
Doing well. Hope you had a good Thanksgiving. Thank you for coming on the E-Show podcast, the 100th episode, a very special guest and a very special story that we're going to tell here on the podcast because you've been through just so much. And I hope a lot of people got a chance to watch your Instagram video that you posted because it just tells so much. In that video, though, let's start off. You kind of told the story about what brought you to Boston when you first started playing junior hockey here. Can you kind of retell that story?
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to not only go to 1 nationals, but 2 of them and win one of them as well. It was at the second nationals where Coach Mark Jones from the Boston Bandits saw me, and he reached out to me after one of the games, and we talked a little bit, gave me a little bit about the organization and what they believed in, and obviously you can't really commit to something right then and there, but I went home and talked to my parents, and at first I actually did say no. Wanted to stay at home, stay close to home, try out in St. Louis again, and for some unforeseen circumstances didn't work out in St. Louis, and we reached back out to Mark Jones, just thanking him for the opportunity and the offer. He actually asked if I had a spot landed yet, and if we would run into each other during the season. We told him no, and he said that you have 24 hours to decide yes or no. I actually remember I was at one of my buddies' graduation parties, and that when he called or emailed back and said that, and said to my dad right then and there, I was like, I'm going. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I'm going to Boston.
Yeah.
And so, one thing led to another, and come August, I moved out to Boston.
When you get that almost ultimatum, I guess you could say, did you feel pressure?
No, I never felt any pressure, but I thought to myself right then and there, I was like, opportunities like this don't come around twice.
Yep.
So I, if I wanted to hop on the opportunity, I had to do it now.
And for those that don't know, the division's called the EHLP now. When you were playing in the league, I think it was called the Elite Division. Mick played for the Boston Bandits in the 2015-16 and 2016-17 season. Had you ever been to Boston before?
No, I've not. So I think the farthest east I ever went with playing in St. Louis was like Detroit or Indianapolis.
Okay. And when you got to Boston, was it what you expected? Obviously, you were in Bridgewater, which is south of Boston, but was it what you expected?
Oh, absolutely. Even and more. I started playing 16U and a little bit of 18U here and there, but I remember even when I joined the EHL, there were kids already committed into the league, like within the league, and I was just like, wow, this is what I asked for, this is what I wanted. So because I wanted nothing more than a Division I scholarship. So, and some of those kids already had one, and they had my dream, and I wanted that as well.
Were you did you feel at times like you're just this kid from Missouri, or where were the rest of your teammates from at the time?
We were from all over the country and world. I had teammates from Alaska, California, Florida, Texas, all that, and, within the US, and then Latvia, Germany, Sweden, just all of those Eastern European countries, and Russia, it was all over. So it was great. It was a great experience getting to play with them and, learning, because we all had different styles of play. So it was great to learn things from them. And, that was awesome.
And in terms of your coaches, some of them are still involved in the EHL. Some are in different leagues now. Todd Stilling is still involved with the Walpole Express. Scott Drevich in a different league now. I know Drevich was your actual coach. What was the connection like that you had with your coaches? And in particular, I was told to ask you about a guy that you referred to as Bussy Bob.
Yeah. So the coaches every single coach was unbelievable. I was always wanting to get better each and every day. And I know I for sure annoyed them with all the questions I had, but they were always willing to answer them and tell me what was good and bad about a play or practice or this or that. And Bussy Bob was pretty special. Bussy Bob, he was our bus driver for pretty much every single team. He took us to every single game almost. And he was a special guy. And I remember, I think he had a knee surgery at one point, or knee replacement surgery. And, he said on his days that he struggled, that he looked to me for resilience and motivation. And that really meant a lot to me, because, all he wanted to ever do is see us succeed. And for him to say that about me, that meant a lot.
I think that's a great transition to start getting into what happened to you, because when I came across your video, the timing of this all works out that it's been 5 years. It's the 100th episode. So you are a very special guest. With every year that passes, like, how much time do you spend going back to that moment in your career and that injury?
I really don't spend too much time, thinking about it or anything like that. Cause, something I've really taken into perspective is that, things happen, like bad things can happen. That's life. It happens to everyone. Life's going to hit you with the unintentional, the unexpected at any given moment. And that's what happened to me. It was just another normal game day. We were down on a 4-game road trip down south, coming off a big win against the Philly Revolution the night before. We were playing the New Jersey Rockets, and guy was coming down the ice, took the shot on our goalie. He got it to the sideboards like every goalie's supposed to. And I read that play and took a couple crossovers, and my teammate Pat, touch passed it to me, and I started skating up the ice. And in the video, you can even see they're wanting me to go down the sideboards, and I was, wanting to make more of that play. So I banked the puck off the boards and tried to cut into the middle. Is when I cut into the middle that I just lost my balance and basically fell into the guy. I dove right into the guy, and in that process, my C5 vertebrae exploded, basically as a burst fracture, is what the doctors called it, and paralyzed from my shoulders down. It was one of those 2-second blackouts when you run into someone, you're like, oh, my bad, I didn't mean to do that. It was kind of like that. And I first off looked to see who I ran into before I even tried getting up. I see the kid holding his leg. And right then and there, that's when I tried to get up, and I couldn't. I felt like my shoulder was getting off the ice, but it didn't move at all. My feet felt like they were up in the air. And I just remember, I quickly right then and there knew everything changed. My teammate came up to me and was like, Deeves, come on, baby. You got it. Like, you're good. I said, dude, I can't move. Like, I'm paralyzed. Like, I know it right now. And, trainer came on the ice, and, obviously we couldn't do much on the ice. So EMTs came, took me to the hospital, had surgery that night. My parents were watching the game live back home in Missouri. So I was able to talk to my dad in the ambulance ride over, and a couple of different times in the hospital, but really not much. So I was just kind of isolated there with my thoughts. Something that no 17-year-old or anyone should have to go through, but like I said, life hits you with the unexpected at random times. So
I want to ask a few questions about that whole story, because you say you don't go back, you don't second guess this or that. How do you not second guess in your head that if you had hit an inch differently in either direction of the player's leg, or if you hadn't moved the puck off the wall and it got in a different direction, how do you not second guess that in your head?
Like I just growing up, I was always the youngest in every single sport I played. And I, have been given a lot of resources while growing up playing sports to, never let anyone say that they're better than you. Never give up. You're only as good as your last play.
Yep.
So I knew that with everything in my mind that that last play in New Jersey that night is, I gave everything I had. Like, it wouldn't have been me if I didn't skate the puck up. We were winning by a big margin, yes, but it doesn't matter because you never know who's watching. You like the game as long as the clock doesn't have 3 zeros on it, then the game's not over. So you have to try 100% of the time. So, I knew that, in the hospital room when I was laying there by myself, all I could do is look at 3 stars on the ceiling and the clock just ticking. And I was, of course you're asking the questions, why me? I'm this close to my dream. I'm this close to the next step, this close to this close. And it was right then and there. I was like, the clock, it's not midnight yet. When it hits midnight, it's a brand new day. And all I can do is move on and get better because, there's no point in, it's not going to, there's no point in the woes and the why me's, because that's not going to help yourself. And that's not going to help your family and friends or the doctors or anyone. So I knew right then and there that, it starts with me and it starts with the positive mindset, because if you don't have a positive mindset, then you're just going to stay stationary.
Yeah. And at 17 years old to compose yourself like that, it's incredible. And in the story that you shared on your Instagram, you talked about how you got on the phone with your parents in the ambulance ride over, but you would not tell them in that ride that you were paralyzed. Why was that?
Because no parent really needs to hear that over the phone, or ever. I knew they were watching the game. I knew they watched the hit. It's just, there's certain things, and like, the EMT, she took off my skate and touched my foot, and I said I felt that. So that was already a good sign.
Okay.
I didn't, realize with paralysis that there was loss of sensation and loss of motor movement.
Okay.
I didn't know that at the time. So, so when I felt her touch my foot, I was like, oh, I'm good. It's, it's not going to be as bad as what we maybe thought. But in the back of my mind, I still knew I was always going to be, I was paralyzed. Yeah. But yeah, I told my dad that it was just a stinger and to tell mom not to freak out. So
when were you able to actually tell them what actually happened, and when did they come out? Because you're on the road in New Jersey, they're home in Missouri, all your stuff's in Boston. Like, how quickly did things kind of unfold the next few days?
Yeah. So I didn't really have to tell them, all the circumstances, since I was 17. I'm a minor. So, the doctor's the one the doctor's not coming to me and saying, hey, we're doing this for surgery.
Yeah.
Like, he gave me an update of what we were going to do, but he had to get my parents' consent for everything.
Yeah.
All the medicine they gave me, all this, all that. So, I remember, my dad saying that they tried going to bed that night, but they couldn't sleep. And at like 3 a.m, they had a flight at like 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. the next day. At like 3 a.m, they just got up and left to go to St. Louis. They drove to my grandparents' house, left the car there and came out to New Jersey. I remember the very first thing I can actually remember after the surgeries is them coming into the room. But I don't remember the conversation or anything, because it's all kind of a blur. That whole first week's kind of a blur. I don't remember much, but I had surgery at 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. that night. and then the night of the injury, and then a couple of days later, they went back through, had another surgery, and then I was in the PICU for 21 days, and then I moved to rehab in New Jersey for 6 months, 4 months inpatient, 2 months out.
And while you're in New Jersey, you get to meet guys like Scotty Kramer and Eric LeGrand, who that's the name that I recognize more. When you got to meet, I guess you can call them bigger personalities that have been through similar experiences that you have, did it give you kind of a settling feeling and make you kind of more at ease with what had taken place?
So with Eric, I even heard of Eric when he got hurt back in 2010. I used to watch, I used to watch Sports Center every day, and I remember, watching, the injury and all that, all about his story, and keeping up with him. So I really turned to Eric for lots of guidance, because by the time I got hurt, it was 7 years post injury for him. So I turned to him for a lot of guidance. And then with Scotty, I met him in rehab. Like I met him at the rehab facility, and he was awesome. We were with each other every single day, had therapy at the same times. We ate lunch and dinner together. Like we were literally attached at the hip pretty much. And with him, I really turned to him for, motivation. We were both athletes. We both got hurt doing what we love. Both were complete fluke accidents, would never happen again. Just that, the life hits us unexpectedly. And we both kind of understood that. So we both weren't angry or upset with our injuries. It was just, this is how life is right now. We just have to attack it head on.
And as you begin the rehab process, what sticks out for me is there's so many numbers and dates that you will never forget, and you recite at the snap of a finger. And you said February 4th, you walked again. What was that part of the journey like for you?
That was amazing. So, it was a Saturday, and we go Monday through Friday, like 3.5 hours of therapy, or 4 hours of therapy every single day. So Saturdays are kind of more of a chill day to, we stretch, maybe do some other balancing movements or whatever we may do, depending on your situation. I was going in expecting that, and I go in and I, get to, at this time we're working on, standing just in general. It's called a standing frame. So I was kind of expecting to be in that, where just working on my blood circulation, my blood levels, and just things like that. And so we get in, I get in, my dad stays in the room at this morning, and I go, so, hey, what are we going to work on today? She goes, oh, we're going to walk. And I said, excuse me? She goes, yeah, we're walking today. And I was like, well, all right. So we did start off in that standing frame just to, regulate my blood levels. And then from there, we moved me into the parallel bars. Well, we're still doing is just, like, for the time being, we're kind of just working on standing me up, and standing me up. And then since your blood circulation and your, all that, your blood levels like get so wacky when you get hurt with a spinal cord injury, that, my therapist goes to the helping aide that we have in therapy. She goes, hey, will you go to his room, grab a Gatorade or whatever, like for electrolytes? So she's, yeah. So she goes to my room. My dad thinks he's the ultimate Candy Crusher. So he's in the room playing Candy Crush. And the aide gets in there and goes, hey, can we get a Gatorade for Mick? He goes, yeah, here you go. What are we working? Like, what's he working on today? She goes, oh, we're walking. My dad said, excuse me? Like, what do you mean we're walking?
Yeah.
And so he came to the gym, and therapy gym, and yeah, we were walking. And I remember, every time you would stand me up, I was just like, just please don't pass out. Please don't pass out. Like, we're once again right to this next level, right to this next step, that we're just this close to what, my next goal is walking. And so, yeah, we got me up and took some steps, and that was so special. 'Cause, like, my left leg, my whole left side still is a little bit affected today, but was really affected back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so the left side, we would just, if I was able to take a step, it was like the tiniest step you would ever think of. But that right leg, I could really get a good step. I could really at least get that movement going. And, so I could feel that, I could feel the blood rushing throughout my legs, like moving. And that just was awesome again. Cause it's like, I never expected to feel that again. So.
I want to make a comparison. I don't know if it even applies here, but for you, did it feel like scoring a goal again?
Yeah. I mean, it's, all that excitement, all that, adrenaline, it was all right there. But, just like in any big circumstance, like whether it's a game or whatever, I had to control myself, because if I did get too excited, I would have probably passed out. So I definitely had to, keep it mellow and just focus on what I was, doing at hand there.
And when you're going through all these, different stages of the rehab, this one sounds like it kind of caught you off guard because you weren't expecting it that day. But did you guys write down goals together, or was this just what they came in and told you were doing? That's what you were doing?
It was, I always said that from the second I got hurt that I just need my hands to come back, and then I'll start focusing on walking again.
Okay.
Like I'll be good. And then, but that's just the stubborn, like hard-headed, like I'm going to get better kind of thing, where that's certainly not the case for most spinal cord injuries.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a blessing in itself. But no, when I got into rehab, it was really just, I told them, I was like, I want to walk again. And, it's really, you work with what you get back, because you don't know what's going to come back. You don't know how strong muscles, when they do come back, or how strong you can get them, they will be. So it's really just kind of like a day by day process, week by week, month by month, that you just deal with what you got, and, go for, and you with what you do have, you explode it, you explode from there and just focus on that.
And after that moment on February 4th, what were the next few months like? And were there times when you said to yourself, all right, I'm ready to go home?
And so it was, it was my senior year of high school. So all my friends are graduating and doing the prom and all that stuff, where, if I was playing hockey, like I would have been like, oh, I'm playing hockey. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
But, I wasn't at this time. So it was kind of like, yeah, I'm ready to get home, see my friends, because yes, I had Scotty and Eric there, and I had, a couple of my teammates come down. I had one teammate living in New Jersey at the time. Like, I had them, but it's, they're still in season. They're still doing their thing. So for the most part, it was just me and my dad. And, I just, once we got to outpatient rehab, it was definitely towards the end of outpatient rehab that I was like, okay, I'm ready to go home. So I came home the day after what I would have graduated from high school. So that was fun. I got to see all my friends and family, because it was the summer. Got to hang out with them, and, and some people definitely took it, they were scared to see me, just because, I'm completely, well, what they thought was a completely different person. But, I'd tell them, like, my body has changed, not my character, not my personality. So, and once they got to see me and like see how I interacted with everyone, they definitely, that calmed their nerves, and, things were back to normal. But it was, it was never a question of wanting to get better. It's just a time to be like, yeah, it's time to go home, see what we can do back there.
You brought up an interesting point there, because it's something that some of us will never experience. When you see friends for the first time and they're almost afraid to give you a hug, how do you even respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely, the thing with me is, I always tried to put things, into a brighter perspective.
Okay.
So like, I would always make jokes, try to get them to laugh first, or, say like things are okay, but like, I'm still who I am as a human being. Like I said, this doesn't change my character. This doesn't change my personality. Am I going to be able to run miles and miles and miles again? Most likely not, but that's okay. Like, but just my personality has never changed. So
Yeah.
once, like I said, once they were able to see me and like be able to, touch me and just be around me, things were back to normal.
And for myself personally, I know it was just my second year in the EHL. It's kind of things like this have happened before, different players, but for me, there's always going to be two events that will always stand out. It's what took place to Mick Deaver and the Humboldt Broncos. And I remember shortly after all this had taken place, you're going through the rehab, you kind of came out and said, like, I'm going to skate again. Obviously, not to the same extent, but you have skated again. When you touch the ice again, when you compare it to walking for the first time, how do those two feelings compare?
Oh my God, it was amazing. I mean, when I took those first steps, and when we got to outpatient rehab, it was when I really exploded with that walking. When I came home, I was like, okay, I want to skate again. I don't care how long it'll be, or like I'm gonna skate again. With me, after my injury, things will always look different. I can do whatever I put my mind to, but things might look a little different. Well, I want to do things what would be a normal way first. So, people always mention to me about the sled hockey. And I said, no, I don't want to do sled hockey until I've reached my limit to skating, like on my own 2 feet.
Got it.
But the skating alone was just, it was so hard because it was just using muscles I just either don't have or trying to use them. And that was beyond, hard, but, it was so special. And, it was even more special that I was doing it at the rink that I fell in love with hockey at. My dad was lacing my skates up for the first time again, like he used to, 18 years ago prior to that. It was just so special. And, I had my close family and friends there, and just to be able to do that in front of them, the ones that have really been by my side from day one was unbelievable.
And you're the type of person that you're always thinking forward, but in that moment, was there ever a feeling of closure that all of this rehab was worth it?
Absolutely. I mean, it was definitely like, one of my first thoughts was when I did get hurt, I was like, well, my hockey career is over.
Mm-hmm.
And, whether that's hockey career or just being back on the ice for like a stick and puck or just men's league, just whatever it may be, like, I just want to get back on the ice, or just skating in general. I just want to be back on the ice, because when you're a hockey player, that's your safe haven. That's where you can just be like whatever you want to be, and play however you want to play. And so I definitely just wanted to get back on the ice. And that was, I'm sure somewhere back in the day that I did say all I want to do is skate again, but I had to go step by step, goal by goal. So accomplish one goal, move on to the next. So,
and what's the next goal? Where are you at now, and what do you want to do with the future?
So what I want to do is, I definitely want to stay involved with hockey. Throughout this journey, my family and I, we've been able to create a non-for-profit foundation called the Be Strong 29 Foundation, where if, someone was affected by a spinal cord injury, and maybe couldn't afford a ramp into the house, or they needed some sort of equipment for their car, or whatever it may be, that they need something to help them with their daily lives, or their family's daily lives, we would be able to help pay for some of that or pay for all of it. We've been able to donate money to the PT and OT programs here at the University of Missouri, where I attend school. So I definitely want to stay involved with that, but then I also want to be able to give back through an NHL team. I want to be able to bring a kid down to the locker room after a game, or, go to a hospital with a player of whatever organization it may be, and, surprise kids and give signed jerseys to kids. Cause that was given to me, and I want to be able to give that back, because I know how that made me feel as, just a 17-year-old. And, to be able to give that back to maybe like a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old, that would just mean more to me than anything.
And you'll start this as soon as you graduate?
I'm already starting to know.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast.
I appreciate it.
As I mentioned before, for me, I'll always remember that night looking at the box score and being like, why is this game not finalized? And then talking with Mark Kumpel, who's another guest on this podcast coming on after you, and learning about what took place. And it's just truly inspiring the way that you've embraced this and you've kind of just taken it on and run with it. And to hear your goals for the future, if there's anything that the league can do to help, we're all in.
I greatly appreciate that. And I appreciate all your support and Mark's support and the league support, throughout this whole journey, because without it, I don't know where any of us would be. So,
well, take care and we'll talk soon.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm joined now for the very first time on the E-Show podcast by Mark Kumpel. How's it going, Mark?
It's been doing pretty good considering the pandemic, the referee shortage, all the things that the hockey people are experiencing these days. I will tell you that the job that I'm in now, we're working for the Eastern Hockey Federation, is a big animal compared to the EHL with its 30-odd teams when we were running it. Neil, I'm at 456 teams, and that means 1,000 parents and 7,000 participants. It's a big job.
A little different for sure. I've interviewed you once before, but for the first time on this podcast, which we started, January of, I couldn't even tell you what year. But as you mentioned, we were kind of like each other's go-to guys for a number of years. So I have to start off with my own personal question, because this is episode 100. We're bringing you on, the first real commissioner of the EHL. But for the first 2 years, it was just you and Jeff Nygaard. I came on in season number 3. How annoying was I pestering you the first 2 years until I got a job with the league?
You weren't annoying at all, Neil. I gave you all my little rubbish, garbage, little things that needed to be done. And you know what, Neil, I actually, we knew each other from up here in Scarborough, Maine. I watched you play high school hockey a bit. And you have a great education at Quinnipiac. You fit the bill perfectly. I brought you in and I introduced you to Jeff Nygaard. He patted me on the back and says, okay, we got ourselves a little guy that can take care of all that stuff. And, I made it my mission to try and include you with all the things that I was doing. So that, somewhere along the way that I moved on, which I did. And now look at yourself. You've become a very, very big part of the EHL, and they're better for it. So, it worked out well. So, that's the coach in me. I've always tried to, enjoyed coaching, to see the epiphany in kids' eyes when they figure stuff out. And, when you came in, you were a blank slate, and you gobbled up anything I threw at you. You were great.
And I appreciate that. I'm going to say thank you more than once on this podcast, probably. But I also kind of want to tell different stories over the years, because we had so many moments that I found myself repeating to some of my staff members now, because every day was something different. But first, I want to start with the story of what we just talked about on the podcast, where I got a chance to interview Mick Deaver. And I said to Mick in the interview, like, I still remember that night saying to you, why isn't this box score finalized? And all that you had for information at that time was something bad happened. Can you take us through, from your perspective, what took place on that night and the next day?
Well, as you know, the EHL always had put a lot of importance in information, whether it's the rosters, the scores, real-time scores, video, made sure live barn was up and running, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a real anomaly when that came out. And you, as the information director at the time, was, where's the score mark? Where's the score mark? And I understand. I said, wait a minute. So anyway, I made a few phone calls and I found out that there was a terrible accident. And my first thing, oh my God, who are we going to have to suspend? And the reality is, when everything shook out and I was able to see the video and whatnot, it was a completely incident that was no malice, no nothing. It just happened. It's one of those things in life that it's like a car accident where the tire falls off the wheel, and that's exactly what happened. The player that that ultimately there was no opportunity to avoid what happened to Nick. And I watched that video probably 7 or 8 times, every single time. And right now I just got a shiver thinking about how it happened and the ultimate outcome for Mick, what it was. And it was a horrible day. You start to think like all the times that I played and all the incidents I went in, and I can stand up and I still played hockey this morning and things like this. And to think that this young man is going to be struggling for a long time, it's disheartening, and you wonder how I was a lucky one and how a freak accident like this affected this young man's life.
And like, I was thinking of this when I was interviewing him. Think about how many times you've tripped on skates just by accident and you hit right here on the boards or right here on your buddy. The way that he hit on the player's leg, any inch in a different direction, it's totally different for him.
Yep. And it's a game of inches. You can, whatever, there's all the cliches you can work. It was a complete accident. It's a misfortune in life. Even though you might be able to remind me, I can't remember the gentleman that was involved, and the other from the Rockets.
I'm blanking on the name myself.
Yeah. But I mean, there's nothing he could do. I mean, that what he has to suffer with every day, So
yeah,
it's a game of inches. It's an awesome game. I still play. I played this morning. Little bit less than I used to, but at the same time, we have a good time, and it puts a smile on my face. And I hope that Mick, when he thinks about it, other than that 3 seconds of time that it took, I hope all his memories are fond of the game, because I believe it was. I talked to him once or twice, pretty close after the incident, and he seemed to have a very positive outlook.
It's incredible how he's just taken this on in stride and created almost a new life for himself, and taking it and when he said to me that he knew in that moment he had left everything out there, it's like, man, this kid just totally gets it. But that's kind of the somber tone that I wanted to have, at least to start. But as I mentioned to you kind of off the air too, there's different stories from each season that we had together that I want to touch on, starting with my first year, which was the 2015-16 season, a year where the New Hampshire Monarchs beat the Philadelphia Little Flyers in the championship. And maybe this is still a little bit somber tone with the somewhat recent passing of Ryan Frew. But now when you look back on that championship and seeing Ryan win it with your former assistant, Tony DeLessio, what was your initial reaction for that program?
It didn't surprise me that they were there. They had great pedigree before they joined the EHL. I know Tony DeLessio extremely well. He's extremely driven. I knew that they had recruited a good team. The opponent was very good too.
Yeah.
And I think back to during that championship. First of all, I took great pride in the fact that we had such a good championship. The EHL, we came out of the ashes of the AJHL and became the EHL, and it's something that I don't know how lucky I was to be at the right place. And somebody gave me the reins and to try and grow that league and bring it to a point where it was a premier junior league in the USA Hockey. So I think that particular championship, I had won championships, but I had never sort of guided, had the hands on the steering wheel to get it to that point as an administrator. Mm-hmm. And the show that was put on and the fans, the fan base that was there, and all those things above was a source of pride for me. It really was. Thinking about Ryan Frew, he did a lot of great things for hockey in that area. He's sorely missed. You see they're still running golf tournaments to help the family and things like that. And it does extremely well. It just speaks volumes of what people thought of Ryan and the quality of person and the quality of a hockey guy that he was. So,
and that's a great point, because I feel that way now. When I hand off the trophy, it's almost the culmination of everything that you worked for a whole year. In that exact moment, you can take a couple of months to kind of decompress and then do it all over again. And we did it all over again. Oh, sorry, you go.
No, I was going to say, it's two different feelings. I've won the championship in the old AJHL before it became the EHL. And you have the whole year, you're behind the bench, and you recruited the guys. You sat in people's living rooms during the summertime, and you convinced mom and dad that you were the best thing since sliced bread, and you were going to help their kid. And then you see yourself in the championship game. And, if you walked into the Walpole Arena right now, you could see the picture on the wall. For me, I put myself in the background. The kids were all in front of me because at that point I said, hey, I didn't do this for me. It was for the kids. And Ryan Frew did it for the kids. And now the first time when we handed off that trophy that year was the first time I had a different look, and I'm out on the ice and I had the microphone in my hand and I'm like, do I really want to do this? I didn't do it. I didn't want this. This is the kids. But then you realize, hey, you know what? This is something that I had a big hand in building, and it was a good thing.
And I want to keep with championships because the next year is probably one of the craziest stories that I ever get to tell. That was when it took the junior Flyers and little Flyers a solid 13 days to finish a 5-game series. And halfway through that, I went out to Detroit with my father to go see the Joe Louis Arena before they knocked it down. That series, looking back on the 3 overtime games and the battle between the little Flyers and junior Flyers that year, what do you remember most?
My ears were burning. The owners were, what's going on? And the coaches were, what's going on? And you're sitting in a position where you can't play favorites, nor did I have a favorite in that fight anyway, put it that way. It's Neil, what do you say? The 3 overtime games, and it takes 2 weeks to finish up a little series. What do you say?
And I'll embarrass myself because you began the drive home while I wrote the story on the website or whatever I was doing. And I was so tired that I tried to drive a little bit. Did I last 15 minutes? And then you were like, I don't trust you. I'm getting back behind the wheel.
Yeah, give me the wheel. But you know what, Neil, that's the things that make you and I close, and also why the league has had success, because they had people like you and I behind it, willing to do those things in the middle of the night, drive down and fight the fights that need to be have, and keep peace and order and make sure all the rules are followed. There's passion in you. There was passion in me at the time. And that's why the EHL is still one of the premier leagues in the country.
Those 2 years were awesome. Starting in the 17-18 season, to me, what I tell people is when things really started to take off, because first in that fall, we faced UMass Boston for the very first time. That was the only game we had. And we lost 3-1 with an empty netter. But you and I took great pride in the fact that Nolan Redler scored all 3 goals for UMass Boston, who was our alumni. Yes. And our goalies made 56 saves or something like that. But you're the one that created that idea that we've turned it into. How did you come up with the idea to face a college team?
It came to me, to be honest with you. It was the staff of UMass Boston. They kind of cooked it up, and I took the ball and ran. It was something the coaching staff there thought would be a good take. I don't know what possessed them to even offer that. If you think about it, if we went in and beat them, holy smokes. And as a coach, I would have said, great, now I really have their attention if I lost to a junior team. I was a college guy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if they do, it doesn't look good. And, that was the hardest thing in that was trying to make sure that everybody got an opportunity to be part of that. It's a very difficult process when you had one game and you're only going to bring 21 players in. That's a game every player in the EHL at the time would want to play in.
Yep.
You had to make sure that you brought a team that A, did justice to your league, but B, you have UMass Boston at the time, they're sticking their neck out. They're saying, hey, come on in. So you have a responsibility to put a good hockey team on that ice. And to put a good hockey team on that ice when you have so many, you got to hurt some feelings. And that's not a comfortable thing to do, but it paid dividends for the league, paid dividends for the kids that went on there. And you're right, that Nolan Redler, he was a pain in the neck when he played for Cyclones, but he was a pain in the neck when we played him in college. But he's a good hockey player.
And it's funny because you always call me around that time every year now to see how I'm doing, because I want to say thank you. The event's great, and we probably have 12 schools that want to play. But man, is it a headache to put that roster together?
It's really tough. Putting the trip together is easy because the ownership at the time, and I'm sure the ownership now, is 100% behind it. They see the value in it. They see the opportunity for their players and their, let's call them what they are. Their customers are theirs. Yeah. So they were really good. The ownership in the EHL at the time, I'm sure it's still the same. They were very, very accommodating and they were very willing to back initiatives that you and I and Jeff Nygaard put together to try and make the league better. So those were the easy things, but getting to that roster. And so I try to make it easier the next year. We put together, basically, what was it, 30 guys? And I think it was
30 guys, yeah.
Three teams of 10 kind of shifted through. 1 and 3 played game 1, 2 and 3 played game 2, and 1 and 2 played, whatever it was. And but on the other side of the coin, and we didn't embarrass ourselves, which was a fear when you start to get down to the 30-man roster, the player number 27, 28. Will you have enough to give your opponent a good game? And we did. And credit to all the EHL coaches of the time and how hard they worked to get their rosters set. It is a business, but every single one of those guys did anything and everything they could to have a roster that they could win with, because everybody knows winning's fun.
Yes. And I won't divulge all the information right now, but for those listening, I'm emailing coaches right now that are asking about being in that spot next year. And it's December of the current season. So, but I mentioned before, to me, the 2017-18 season was when things really took off, in my opinion, because first that event in the fall, but then the event that we had in what we'll call the spring in March, that was the first edition of the Frozen Finals, probably because the last finals took 13 days to finish with the 2 Flyers teams, but we created this 4-team round robin. And again, it was kind of more your idea at the time. Why?
It was my idea, but at the same time, you drove the bus, man. You loved it. You fell in love with it, man. And you spent a lot of time down at Providence College making sure everything was settled and going. And that was the year that I think Chris Sorella came up to visit me in the press box, I think.
The next year. I want to get to that story. I have a better story from that year. That year was the year when John Roger yelled up to you, Kumpel, because the calls kept not going in his favor. Kumpel, get down here. And you yelled back, I'm not going anywhere.
That's the one thing is, the coaches in the league, they looked at me, hey, I lived their lives. I was in the league and I coached for 5-6 years. And so they appreciated that fact. But once you get in the position that you're in and the position I was in, really, you're not much more than a spectator once that puck drops. Before the game, 100%. After the game, you can have an effect. But once that game's in progress, the only people that have any ability to do are the officials on the ice and the coaches in the game. That's it. I mean, I'm not going to go down there and change an offside call or tell them, hey, that goal wasn't in. That's their call on the ice. Ultimately. So, but there again, we talked about passion earlier. There's the passion of John Roger screaming from the bench, and there's the visitation by Chris Seller into the press box. And the guys wanted to win. They wanted the things to go well for them and their players, because they know how hard their players work for them all year long.
I can't wait for Chris to hear this, because the background of Chris yelling and climbing up into the press box was they gave up a goal against the Little Flyers, and he was convinced that it should have been goalie interference because the Little Flyers player went barreling through the Avalanche goalie. But when you found the tape and you wound back and showed him the Avalanche, his own player, cross-checking the Little Flyers player into his own goalie. What sense of pride in being right did you get?
Wait a minute. Chris didn't allow me to be right. I was still wrong. And that's one of the things that I had the luxury of doing, with my background and the years I've been in the game. I have associations around the country, and I actually took that video and I sent it to 3 or 4 different people I know. The USHL referee in chief looked at it for me, and the NA guy looked at it for me, the USA hockey guy. Anyway, long story short, everybody came back. Yeah, that's a good goal.
Yeah.
So I knew I was right. At the same time, but Chris, we gotta love him, but he wasn't gonna let me be right, no matter if I was right. So.
He won both years. He can't complain about anything.
Yeah, he won both years. He worked. Hey, Chris Sorella works hard. Not that not anybody else doesn't. I mean, Chris Sorella he's a very charismatic person, very boisterous, not afraid to share his opinion. Sometimes that causes jealousy amongst the crew, so to speak, the coaching ranks. But at the same time, Chris, like everybody else, works hard for his players, and there's been a ton of players that go through his, as well as the Boston Junior Rangers is back, as well as the Walpole Express with John Lonsberry when he was there, and still moving on. Those guys, every one of those guys in the EHL works extremely hard. And that's the one thing that myself and Jeff Nygaard really went after, was the push to get kids into college. When I was coaching, we had maybe 5 or 6 teams in the league that were really had that in mind. The customer is here. Why did he come? Why is he giving us $5,000-$6,000 to play for us? Well, you're supposed to help him get exposure and help him get better and try and get him onto college things. And then, at the time we implemented I can't remember what we called it at the time, but it was basically a point system where the teams had to achieve. My first year with myself and Jeff Nygaard cooked it up, the teams had to achieve a certain number of returning players. So that tells the people out there that they have a really good program and they work hard for them. We had to have a number of players that went on to college in situations, and it was a point system. And there actually was a fine system in place. Our owners were going to charge themselves money to make sure that everybody in the EHL was doing what they're supposed to do, which was try to help those kids move on to a better situation. And that goes back to what I was saying about the EHL ownership at the time. They were very, very on board about making the product great.
And it's funny because now when you fast forward to where I am in my current role, and the new groups that come in or apply, and they look at our rules for the first time, and they're like, whoa, these are pretty in depth. But I think it's a credit to what you and Jeff did and what you tried to instill in me, because as in depth as they may be, it's what makes us that much better as a league.
Yeah, those rules, it was easy. It was easy because you open the book, there's the rule, apply it, be done with it. And that really came from Jeff Nygaard. He was an ex-referee and an ex-official, and it was either black or white with him. And when I came in, I think that's where I added a lot to the league in my first year, where I took out the black and white, and I didn't take it out. I certainly started at the black and white and tried to see if I could put some shades of color into it if there was an opportunity to do. Ultimately, we're not trying to be punitive as administrators, or you don't want to be punitive, but you also have to keep some civility in the game. Exactly. And you want to make sure you want to get things right, but at the same time, you got to make sure that you're not trying to run down to the glass and change the call on offside, so whatever it is. So, those things play. But again, Jeff Nygaard was one of the guys that did that. But it makes it easy for you, Neil. You can go right to you open that book, and it's the same book I left there, and you open it up, and oh yeah, here it is right here. Oh, that's all I have to do. So, but it was a process, but we got there.
And I find myself maybe sounding like you at times. Oh, that's this RS10. And they're like, wait, how do you know what that is? I go, I know exactly which one it is. And this is what Mark taught me. But maybe for episode 200, I'll have Jeff come on to talk more about that. But obviously, that finals ends with Chris, and later that summer was when you officially resigned for new endeavors. And I find it interesting because I've been watching some of the college football coaching changes that have taken place in the last week, and a lot of coaches are getting just torn apart for the way that they've not delivered the message to the right people first and then just left. You went out of your way to call me and say, this is what's coming, and I want you to hear it from me first. So again, thank you. And was it a tough decision to leave what you had built from the very beginning?
No, I wasn't tough, to be honest with you. There's a certain amount of, there's job satisfaction, and as you said, listen, Mark, you that rule book was intense, it's in depth. It was done. That part was done. We had record numbers of players getting put into college. That was done. The job at that time had become rote. It was the same thing every year. Just add water. Let's do it again. Yep. Rinse, repeat, the shampoo bottle, right? And so the job satisfaction had kind of left a little bit, and an opportunity to go. One of the things that I have a regret when I stopped playing in the NHL was I went the NHL directly into coaching. And at the time, my wife, who is French Canadian, really would have loved to have gone to Europe to play. So that's what I had opportunities. Yeah. But when I had the opportunity to get into coaching, I said, I'm going to try that. And the reason why was I looked at the opportunity as coaching as longevity to stay in the game and make an effect on the game that I love and still love at that time. So I got into coaching instead of going over to Europe. And now I've done the coaching. I've been the commissioner of the league. I'm the commissioner of another league, but the opportunity to go coach overseas, in this case, it was China, and to actually coach in the Russian professional league, because we played in the VHL. Basically, how do you say no? Yeah. How do you say no? And I actually went over and I had a terrific time. I lived in Beijing for the season. Every away game, with the exception of the two other teams in China, were in a different country, mostly in Russia, but I've been to Russia, Uzbekistan, Korea. What a great life experiences I had. And born in 1961, I was born when the Iron Curtain was still up and the Cold War was in full swing. So for a guy like me to travel through the Urals and Uzbekistan and places like that, understand that it's open and to find out the people over there just like me, they put it on the shoes and the pants and the socks and everything the same way. Yeah. It was a great experience. And the only disappointment I had the whole thing is the COVID pandemic came in and I had a 2-year contract and I was supposed to go back. And because of the shutdowns, I couldn't get back over across the border. In fact, they actually shut down the VHL team. They kept the KHL team running, but they shut down the team just because it was too difficult to do. From that standpoint. And yeah, so it was an easy thing when the offer came, the opportunity came, and the icing on the cake now is going to come here in February. If the Olympics go off like they're supposed to, I probably have 5 or 6 kids that will be on that Chinese roster that I actually coached. So awesome. Kind of, I played in the Olympics, and now I've coached kids to get to the Olympics. So, that there's a certain job satisfaction there, so yeah. It was an easy decision. And then when I got back, I was fortunate to have the experience with the EHL and the reputation that we built together, Neil. And the EHF came and knocked on my door and said, hey, listen, we're making a change in our policies and our operations, and we'd like you to come over. And I landed on my feet, and I had a soft landing, even though the pandemic gave even a lot of people a hard landing.
So I have to ask then, because you did mention this to me, is the pair of skates, the brand new pair of skates, is that still over in China?
Thanks for opening the wound, pal. at 60 years old, the last thing you want to do is break in a new pair of skates. But, I was coaching over there. I was every day on the ice. I said, hey, give me a new pair of skates. So I figured I'd wear them. I just starting to feel good and breaking them in. And we had to take this road trip just as the pandemic started. And I had the foresight to tell everybody to pack everything they had and bring it to the rink, but I didn't have the foresight to pack my new skates in the bag. And we never returned back to China. So my bag sat there with my brand new pair of skates that were broken in. And thanks for opening that wound up, pal.
Oh, we'll find a way to get them to you somehow. But
right.
The last thing I have for you is through it all, you've kept in touch and you've reached out and you've talked to our coaches and you've watched to see what we've continued to accomplish. Do you still feel like a part of it, even if you're not technically a part of it?
It's always going to be a part. I look back at Wakefield High. I'm still a part of Wakefield High, and up here in Maine, I kind of helped out the Scarborough High School a couple of years. I came in and did some cameos and stuff like that, and yet I'm still watching what those kids are doing. And, as a coach, you always kind of follow what whose lives you affected and how you affect them. Hopefully you did it positively. So, I still feel like I'm part of the EHL. I still go to EHL.org. You have to spell the whole darn thing out. Whoever idea that was, that email address was a pain in the neck. Anyway, it's I miss some of the coaches that are still there. Bill Zanaboni was one of my favorite. John Longsbury, I hired to leave. I know he's not there anymore, but he left his mark. And, there's a lot of good people in hockey, and it's a small world. Stay in it for as long as you can, man, because it's great.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. We're not going to let it be another 100 episodes to get you back on. And we'd love to have you come down to the finals maybe this year if you're feeling like it.
Well, I was ready to go last year, man.
But I put him in Philly. You didn't want to come to Philly last year.
After the pandemic chased me into like 5 or 6 different countries, and I got home unscathed. And in fact, when I did arrive home that year, the state of Maine hadn't even had its first case. 4 days later, after I arrived home, they had announced their first case. So maybe I was pacing that pace for zero. Who knows?
Well, thanks for coming on.
I appreciate it, Neil. Thanks, man.
Thanks again to Mick Deaver and Mark Kumpel for coming on the podcast this week. As I mentioned throughout both interviews, 2 very special guests to have on for episode number 100. And I meant what I said. When it comes to Mick Deaver, it's something that I'll never forget the night that took place. The same thing when the Humboldt Broncos took place. There's different tragedies that take place almost every single year, but those 2 will always stand out to me. And I will always remember looking at the box score for that game that Deaver got injured in and wondering, why is this game not finalized? And as things started to unfold, to learn what he had gone through, it made all the sense in the world why that game ended when it did. And just to see the progression that he's gone through as the years have passed and the inspiration that he's become and how he's embraced what happened. It's just truly amazing. And to hear his story on this podcast, I hope that everyone had a chance to enjoy that. And for Mark Kumpel, I did harass and annoy Mark for 2 years before I actually had the chance to take on the role that I have in the EHL. And we had a lot of great times together. And many of the ideas that we still have in this league, Mark has to take credit for those because he helped come up with the All-Star event where we placed the college teams. He helped create the Frozen Finals, and they've grown to what they are today. So big thanks to both of those guests for coming on episode number 100. The E-Crew is not joining me on this episode of the podcast. We haven't had that many games, really, since Thanksgiving. So they were going to make no changes to the power rankings, but just an update so everyone knows where we're at with fantasy. We obviously had some picks that we extended a little bit because of this weird time in the schedule. First, I will recap again the results of the All-Star Classic. We kind of did a different point structure. Jeff, the GM of Team Blue, got 18 points because he won the whole event. Lauren, Team Red, got 12 points. Anthony, Team Gray, got 6 points, and my team, Team White, got 3 points. To recap the other fantasy points that we all accrued, first for Lauren, Billy Hartnett got her a goal and 2 assists, 2 points on the power play for 9 points. And Ryan Pompaselli had a big hat trick on Thanksgiving for the Seahawks Hockey Club in their victory over the Walpole Express, the second annual Thanksgiving Showdown. He then followed things up with a goal in the back end of that 2-game set. They actually lost that game 5-4 to Walpole, but 18 points for him. So when you combine it all together, plus her All-Star Classic points, it's a 39-point week, and that puts her in first place at 278.2. Of course, Jeff getting the 18 points that he got from the All-Star Classic, plus an assist from Grund, Josh Grund, who has moved from the Walpole Express to the Boston Junior Rangers. 3 goals, including 2 on the power play from Dominic Metro, a win over a top 5 team for Scott Bird, and Andrew Kimball, who had a good week as well for the Seahawks Hockey Club. You combine all that together, and Jeff, who we've laughed about being in the basement a little bit for a while this year, added 54.2 points to his total to move all the way up into second place at 268.2. Of course, I've had to hear about the fact that my team got 4th place at the All-Star Classic, but I did get over 30 other points from Trey Miller and Austin Pick, leading to 35.4 points for me, which puts me in 3rd place, 4.2 behind Jeff at 264. And then in last, for now, we've seen how quickly things can change. Anthony is at 244. The big performance for him recently was a shutout for Nathan Miller, who got him 15.8 points just from Miller in that last set of picks. We have some new picks as well coming up here for the next week. You can check all of those out on our social channels with the link for, of course, this podcast. And I'll just say thanks one more time to Mick Deaver and to Mark Kumpel for coming on this week's episode of the podcast. A very special episode, number 100. And the whole E-Crew will be back again next week.
Thanks for listening to The E-Show. Learn more at easternhockeyleague.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Also, be sure to subscribe and get notified when next week's podcast is released.